So a couple of things I'd like to mention before we get started. First of all, I hope that you find this material and information meaningful. I hope it doesn't go on too long. I tried to add a lot of meat and potatoes, let you see some of the forms that we use, orders that we use, and so forth, checklists, that kind of thing. I'd like to start by recognizing Health Services Advisory Committee members. If you're here today, would you mind standing up? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all very much. And then I'd like to recognize also some members of my team that are here today, if you would stand up. So we have Vicki Brown, we have Peggy Key, and Karen is walking in late, I want to point that out. Dakota is in the sound booth. Dakota is making sure that all this looks as good as it can. We were able to drop down one screen. The other screen has a mind of its own, so we may be able to get that moving in the right direction in the future, but we wanted those of you in the back to be able to see that if it was helpful. So at the end, we will take questions, and those questions that I can't answer, I'll defer to my team. Make sure that we are giving you the most updated data. This seminar came about as a request from the Health Services Advisory Committee. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to recognize them. A lot of questions that you have brought to them, they have brought to me and my team. Typically, at the Health Services meetings, I'm there, Vicki's there, and Jeff is there. So the Health Services executives and executive staff attend those meetings and answer questions. And there were some very specific questions that were posed to us. And when we began to elaborate on the answers, Ms. Sadler said, you know, other people are going to want to know this. And I really think you need to have some kind of a seminar speaker type program where you can elaborate on some of these topics. So that's how this came about. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that you have a great advocate in your Health Services Advisory Committee. Every one of them is very dedicated to your health and welfare. So when you see them and greet them, please take the time to express some appreciation to them. Now, if you would like these PowerPoints put on My W Life, I'm happy to do that. Okay? So I want to begin by making sure that I answer the questions posed by the Health Services Advisory Committee. Now, I've also added a little bit of content too. So I hope that this is clear to you, and I'll have some documents to share as well that I hope are helpful. But people ask about the definitions of each level of living. There are really 3 levels of living, even though we have 4 listed here, because memory is sort of carved out because of the scoring system. And the scoring system is something I'm going to show you later. Okay? So when you say, how'd you come up with that number? I'll actually show you the pages that we use for these numbers. So in independent living, you probably remember, most of you remember meeting Peggy or one of her staff in the past to take a little test when you moved in. And I know some of you cheated because you'd already memorized the answers. But that's okay. And so one of the things she was doing was giving you an ADL score rating, and that's what's up here. And then she gave you a MOCA. Remember counting backwards? Yeah, I don't think I could do that either. But that's one of the things we look at to determine if somebody is appropriately placed in independent living. Now, in assisted living, we use the same form, but the raw score is different. And for memory care in particular, we use an ADL score, same as assisted living, but we add a global deterioration score. And for assisted living, that score is typically 5 to 7. Now, sometimes we bring in people at a 4, but it's typically 5 to 7. And 7 means you're probably on your way to health center, okay? And I actually have a copy of this here for you and Karen to answer questions. Health center, exact same form, but the score is different. It's 2.15 to 3.0. And in health center, we use what we call as a BIMS. So that's the cognitive scale for a health center. That goes in the assessment tool. The cognitive scoring for assisted living is global deterioration scale. And for independent living, we use a MOCA. Okay? And I'll cover some of those later. So referring back to some of the questions that health services had, one concern remained availability for placement. That's usually brought up in relation to health center because typically someone is in a crisis and they need that health center bed and they need it as soon as they're discharged from the hospital. Lately, we hear more, of course, about assisted living because of assisted living filling up in memory care, then having an entire floor out of service on the third floor, which is now just coming back into service. And we are working to extend our license, for which we're waiting on the Agency for Healthcare Survey team to come and approve the additional beds. Okay? So, one of the questions posed was, how do we keep track of people? And this is one of the things, you're not meant to see it in detail. It's just a reference for you. This is something that is sent out to our team every day. And it lets us know, and I've marked off names, but it lets us know who's in the hospital, who's planning to discharge, where they're going to go, how many people we have in-house, where we are at our budget. So that's just a reference for you. Okay? In assisted living and independent living, we have a working inventory sheet. And that working inventory gives us an idea of where we are with room renovations, home renovations, apartment renovations. On the top, those units are independent living, and they have been committed. In the middle, what you're looking at is unsold units that are being renovated or completely renovated. At the bottom, you will see assisted living and memory care units. So we keep track of these daily. We meet about them weekly. This, see if I can go back, this sheet we meet about daily. And that is shared with our assisted living key staff like Karen and Peggy, so that they're also aware who's in the hospital, who's coming, who's going. So let me reference back. The other question that was posed is, what about benevolent assistance? What about my assurances through my contract that I will be able to live here for as long as I want, indefinitely, through no fault of my own? So I wanted to share this with you. It is what I share with others if anybody asks me about benevolent assistance. I want them to know there's actually a form that's filled out. We have to put historical data, current data. Some of that current data is current income and current expenses, and then that is shared with our Chief Financial Officer, Hank Keith. Hank Keith goes through that form. He may ask a question. I reference that question back to the resident or their family, and then work towards the approval process. There are also guidelines. This is just the first page of the guidelines. Guidelines has 2 pages that let you know what the requirements are per your level of care. So there's one section for assisted living and there's another section for independent living. Anybody who wants to get these from me, I'm happy to share them with you. So another big question came up about the SARA system. So how does the SARA system really help you? And those of you who were here a couple of town meetings ago, recall that I said how important the SARA system and your check-in is to me personally, that you do that daily. And if you remember that conversation, I told you that nobody had checked on my grandmother for a couple of months, and she had already passed away. And she was there for a couple of months. So just to let you know, that's not happening on my watch. Need for you to check in every day. That's part of our checks and balances to make sure we know you're okay. And if you're not okay, somebody's there within 24 hours, hopefully less, to make sure you get the care and service that you need. So just to elaborate a little bit, the check-in process, is really, really important. We have a deadline. We've actually moved that up. It used to be in the afternoon. We've moved it to the morning. We start making phone calls. We, as in Lillian, usually. We'll make a phone call, go through that list, and if we can't reach somebody, then we send security to knock on the door, because we're hoping not to find you there on the floor. But if you are, we want to get you the help you need. We also have a call bell response report, and I'll show you that next. It's very, very important that when you go out of town, that you let Lillian know, because then we won't keep checking on your empty unit, and some of you don't like us to go into your units when you're not there, and I understand that completely. But if we don't know, then we feel compelled to check, because we're worried about you. And that comes, I hope you know, from a place of compassion. So if you believe you're experiencing an emergency, remember, and if you don't wear your call bell, I wish you would, hit that call bell first, and if you're near a phone, dial 911, okay? What happens is security looks for that ambulance and then tries to guide them very quickly to your residence. So security is involved. The health resource staff helps during the day when they're here, during their office hours. A lot of times they will attend and bring whatever information they have. It behooves you to make sure you have your file of life. If you don't know what your file of life is, you need to come to Peggy and get that, okay? A lot of our paramedics already know to look for it, and it gives them a lot of current data. You need to keep it up to date. But that file of life, you see that sticker on people's apartment doors. It lets the paramedics know to look for that, okay? In the evenings and weekends in particular. So during the week, Peggy and her staff help as well. This is one of the reports I get daily. You may or may not be able to see it, but it basically monitors every single call bell in the community. And I get a list. This is an exception report. You don't see the whole of it. There's a couple names at the bottom. If the time runs over 12 minutes, that is what we put on our security staff. 13 minutes tops to get to somebody's apartment, but we want it to be 12 or less. In the health center, it's 10 or less minutes to answer a call bell. In independent living and assisted, it's 12 or less. So this is 12.01 or more minutes. All right? It says campus-wide average daily response time is 12 minutes, which is within our parameters. So this monitors everybody. I get it every day, as does Robert. It gives us the opportunity to find out if there are any outliers and what may have happened. It really generates more questions than anything else. So this is something that we look to monitor your call bell. This is what we use to monitor health center, and we get that every day per floor, per wing. So when somebody says, hey, I was in the health center, nobody answered my call bell, we can actually look at a detailed report and see when it was actually answered. Sometimes they're right. It was too long. Sometimes they're not right. Sometimes somebody hits the button and says, I'll be right back. We don't really like that. We like for them to provide service immediately. But we do monitor and we do counsel our staff. We ask them for explanations. Hey, this went on longer than the accepted amount of time. In the health center, we want 2 minutes or less to be the ideal, 10 minutes or less acceptable, 10.1 minutes or more unacceptable. So the campus-wide range is about 10 to 12 minutes for call bell response time. And these are things we monitor regularly. Another question was related to physician services. So, and I checked with Lynn on transportation, but one thing you do have at your disposal is the doctors in our health resource center, and we do have a new one, Dr. Ramdale. Am I saying it right? Ramdale. We do have set up doctor days, as a lot of you know. Scheduling can occur with Lillian or Daisy, as you well know. I know some people request Lynn. Lynn is typically going to send somebody out or assist on the off hours or an extension. And every now and then, Robert, why is security calling me? Okay, so you don't need me for anything, good. So physician oversight and assisted living, people in assisted living can still contract with the physicians at FSU Senior Care at, here in the Health Resource Center. Really the nice thing about deciding if you want them to be your primary care physician is that they can follow you in independent, assisted, and skilled. I think that creates a nice continuum of care with a person, not just a system, because it's a big system. And typically in assisted living, a lot of people have their own physicians, and the assisted living personnel set up transportation for them to go and see. A lot of time, family members take them too. Physician oversight in health center. This can be a bone of contention for people because they say, hey, my doctor, I've had my doctor for 30 years. I want my doctor. Is your doctor credentialed with us? Your doctor has to be credentialed with us. Go through the credentialing process. Understand the requirements for skilled care, including short-term rehab when people are under Medicare, and including long-term rehab when people have become a resident in the health center. So our physicians, and we do have a handful in the health center, but they understand skilled, you've got to be seen every 30 days. In long-term care, every 60 days. I am saying that right still, because I'm going back in time. Okay. And so a lot of our doctors don't know that because they don't typically work in a skilled environment. A lot of doctors don't want to. They can make a lot more money in their office. So we do set up transportation to go back to, say, your surgeon, wound care specialist, another specialist. But when people do become permanent care, they do have to choose somebody that comes to the health center. There's a lot of good reasons for that. And one of the biggest is seeing people in their environment, not just reading a note by a nurse, but also interacting with the staff. Because there's an army of people that work in that health center, and a lot of them have good data to share with doctors. We feel that you get the best medical care when your doctor comes and sees you and attends you in the health center, not by appointment outside the health center. We're talking about your primary care physician, okay? So another question from the committee, if I'm ill at home, what can I expect? And Peggy, if I leave something out, please tell me. So one of the things that will happen is wellness visits and internal case management. We have 3 nurses in our health resource center, so they've sort of divided up the campus so that you've got people that can come out. It used to be just one. And we also can provide by contract case management services. That's when you really, really need a lot of attention and maybe more setup, equipment, things like that. And we have 3 contract case managers. So we have Tabitha that you see quite a bit, and I don't remember the name of her company. Do you? Transitions. Senior Transitions, Tabitha. Then we have Robin McDougall. I don't even know if she's got a company name. She's favored quite a bit by FSU. And then we have Lifespan Services. So how do I receive meals? That has historically gone through Peggy and our Health Resource Center to set that up. One of the reasons, and this dates me quite a bit because I've been here 24 years, we have historically set up that through the Health Resource Clinic, because we want our nursing staff in the clinic to know that you're out of pocket and that something's happening to you, that you're not well, and make sure to check on you and make sure that you're being seen by whoever you need to see and that you're not just deteriorating in that house by yourself. So that's one of the reasons why it's historically always gone through the Health Resource Center. Does clinic staff assist with other things? Probably one of the main things is communication with your physician and your family, ordering meals, setting up contract services, home health companies, private duty, sitter services, medical equipment, therapy services, things like that. There's a lot that they do there that you may not even realize. The Health Resource Center is a bustling operation. Peggy can attest to that. Are there outside services available? Yes. The clinic nurse will set those up for you. Or she will set you up with a case manager who will set those up for you. So you have those too. So convalescent days. Convalescent days are for contract residents only. They are not available to anybody who rents. We don't have that many people who rent, but the convalescent days are there typically for respite for you or a spouse or caregiver. And the way I see them used the most is when people come out of rehab and they're not quite ready yet to go home. That's the way I see them the most used, unless you have anything else to add. So how long do they last? So the days 1 through 15, your room and board are covered under your convalescent days, but you're responsible for everything else. I know, I hear people say they're free. It's only room and board that's free. Everything else you pay for. So your pharmacy, durable medical equipment, supplies, meds, all of that you pay for. Okay? Days 16 through 90. So convalescent days really go a long way. So 16 through 90, it's at a fee, and that current fee is $206. And I assume that'll change in April, and I don't have that new number for you. But that's what it is right now. And again, all other services, equipment, everything, you have to pay for. All those products are billed to you, so they come on your statement. But again, room and board, 100% free to you, days 1 through 15. So, your hospital stay. I think I showed you that grid earlier that shows people in the hospital coming in and out of the health center. So when does Westminster get involved? First of all, many of you should have a little business card that says who to call. If you don't have a business card, please see Peggy. It's in your wallet, and when you go to the emergency room or check in the hospital, you get admitted, you just pull that out. They know exactly who to call. And that's why it's there for you. It was actually developed by the Health Services Advisory Committee, I think about 10 years ago. We've had those for a long time. So if you would like one, please see Peggy and have that in your wallet. It's just a little additional assurance for you. The Health Resource Clinic nurse maintains contact with the resident and her family, and they help coordinate services if you come home, not if you go to the health center. That's done through the liaison. The liaison, which is Tammy Falls right now, is the person who's there checking on you and reporting back at morning meeting. And she shares that information as well. So we have information going back and forth. We're checking in, and then we're getting data back. So how do I get admitted to the health center or assisted living? Typically, people coming out of the hospital are going to go health center, okay? Every once in a while, we'll get orders for assisted living. We really like to go back to health center to get a baseline before you go to assisted living. Because again, we have to make sure that we're bringing people in that we can serve properly. So this gives you an idea of what a 3008 looks like. Every single person who is admitted to the health center, whether they come from their home directly, or from the hospital, or from the doctor's office, or from assisted living, we have to have this document on file. It's a 3008, and it's got a lot of data on it. Anybody going to assisted living has to have an 1823. That's a requirement. These are legal documents. They have to be in place by a certain time for us to admit anyone into that environment. So we have these two main documents, one for health center, one for assisted living. This is about a 3-page or 3-page document. So let's talk about how decisions are made. So we have a level of living committee, and I'll actually list the members in a minute. We meet weekly, and one of the main things we do is we go over incident reports from security, incident reports from nursing, and anybody who turns in a stop and watch. And I will show you that document in a minute. A lot of times we are reaching out to family members, telling them of our concerns. We discuss next steps. Typically, you know, because the same names pop up over and over and over, that someone is either struggling or not thriving, kind of a differentiation. They're not doing well in the independent living environment. Some of this information is brought to us from security, some from housekeeping, some from maintenance, some from other residents. We have very, very caring neighbors here that worry about their neighbors, and I can really appreciate that. And then we talk about next steps, and we also talk about who is the best person on the committee to reach out to that family member. It may not be the person who's brought the data forward. It may be another key individual who has a really good relationship with them or their family. Sometimes when we're talking with families and residents, we say, you know, we think now's the time, but you have to understand one more incident is probably going to be another conversation. We really don't want to push people into moving, though we have. We really want to be in agreement. And that's one of the reasons why we share so much data. We didn't used to do this. We didn't used to call family members. This is early on when I started here. We didn't used to call them and tell them every incident that happened. Then we would say, hey, it's time to move. We call the family member, and they were startled and upset and angry and confused and all of that. It's because we weren't bringing them along. And that's why we changed our system so that every incident that happens, we're reaching out, either phone or email, to say, hey, another incident happened, and we just want to make sure you're aware. So that when we conclude, you know, a level of care move is probably time. If you want to come talk about it, have a tour, meet in person, we think it's about time. But sometimes we say, hey, next incident, we're not talking anymore. So, you know, and I've had that conversation actually recently. So I think people believe that administration and others are indifferent when you see a neighbor struggling. A lot of times you don't know the conversations we're having behind the scenes and how sometimes we're getting significant pushback from families. You know, the contract does outline the responsibility to locate and who makes that decision. And the decision ultimately is made by the medical director, who is now Casey Rust. You may not know that. Paul Katz has moved into a different role with our organization. Casey Rust is our medical director, the director of nursing services, and the executive director. Those three are meant to be in agreement about that move. And that's when we can execute that part of the contract and say it's time. And we are doing this. But we don't like to do that. And there are several reasons. One is having somebody look at you and tell you you've ruined their life. Yes, it's happened. And the other one is they're furious. They're angry. They're upset. They've moved into an environment they didn't want to go there. And guess what happens to the quality of life scores? And guess what happens to the relationships that we're trying to foster? They go downhill. And it's complaint, call DCF, call ACA. It is a nightmare for both of us. So we really, really try to bring resident and family along and say, you know what, this is a good move. And most of the time, I will tell you, when people have made that level of care move, typically to assisted living, we'll see them later and they'll say, gosh, I should have done this a long time ago. And one of those reasons is because when you start lining up all those outside services that I mentioned earlier, they cost money. So what you're doing is you have unbundled care. You go to assisted living, it's bundled. It's all there together. The laundry, the food, the housekeeping, everything is just right there together. And the physician oversight, and the nursing oversight, and so forth. And it really becomes a breath of fresh air for a lot of people. And that's what I hear more often than ever. And it makes me feel good when I hear that because I'm like, this worked. I'm so glad it worked. There's also guidelines for residency level of care, and I'll share that with you. This It's terrible. I took it out of a contract book and scanned it. But you all have your own contracts, right? So you can open your contract, page 3, and take a look at where it says responsibility to relocate, which is number 4A on the bottom, and then move at corporate's request. Those are the 2 paragraphs you should get familiar with. I think you will find them helpful and enlightening. So I just wanted to show you where they were, because I can't read that. And yeah, I bet you can't either. So these guidelines for residency of care is actually in your resident handbook. It is page 41 of your resident handbook. In here it looks a little different because my copy is like this, your copy is like that, but the words are identical. So if you will pull out your trustee handbook, I know you have it right on your bedside, and you read it all the time. So if you would look at your trustee handbook, you will see, you can reflect on what I have up here. So you see the difference. So residential living is on the left, assisted in the middle, and health center to the right. And you see some of the same themes. So for health center, they need that constant nursing supervision. Okay? So if you want to read that, read yourself to sleep, then you can pull that out and look at 2 pages for guidelines of level of care. You also see how it's divided up: safety, medication management, physical ability, physical health, and personal hygiene. Okay? Now, since typically people go from independent to assisted, we wanted to make sure to include this slide, and again, it'll be on My W Life, services that cannot be performed in our standard assisted living with our standard license. So what I hear from people is, why can't George go? Why can't Gladys go to assisted living? When you look at some of these things, they read as skilled nursing. So when you're looking at tube feeding, you're looking at airway management, blood gases, post-surgical drainage, things like that, that's stuff we have covered in our health center, where we have that level of expertise. So we have a standard assisted living license because we have a huge health center right next door. Adding to that license means adding to the expense. And we're really trying not to do that. And it's typically one person that needs it. It's not an entire floor that needs that. And a lot of times those services can be performed and somebody can graduate out of health center and go right back to assisted living. So this is the document that I mentioned right at the beginning. See where it says assessment of daily living skills, and you see where it has the points. Okay, they're right there. See it? You can't see that? I'm sorry. I have one right here. But anyway, but this is what Peggy uses right here. All right, for independent. It's what Karen uses for assisted living. Okay? And then this is what helps us identify if somebody's coming in and actually doesn't meet either criteria. All right? So I'm just wanting to reference that. And then I just want to reference these topics. What is included in the assessments? So basically your events of daily living, see the scores, how that works? Okay, and then next. All right, medication, meals, activities, mobility, continence and toileting, emotional, fire safety, nighttime assistance, social abilities, housekeeping, bathing. These are all questions that we ask or try to determine as we talk to you before you become a resident. Dressing, grooming, communication, and congregate living. You know, this setting's not for everybody. And if you're a maverick, oh no, I said it. If you're a maverick, this might not be the place for you. If you can't get along with other people. And I got people in my office complaining every day that you're a nuisance. This may not be the place for you. Okay? Reality to orientation, diet, emergencies, activities of daily living. So those are the things that we're looking at along with the MOCA. Remember, you had to count backwards and then remember that that was a, hippopotamus or a giraffe or something, stuff like that. And what was the last word I said? I don't know who developed that. But anyway, that's the form that we use, okay? So aging successfully, that's probably what you're here to hear more about than anything else. How do you age successfully? So if you moved in here 20 years ago, then you're aware that you were going to move through the level of living. You're going to go on to the next level of care, no matter what. That's pretty much what the mantra was. That's what we're here for. Board made a decision about 10 years ago that, and this was based on their opinion of them moving in to one of our communities. And they said, I don't want to. It's pretty bad when you have a board member sitting there that says, I like being on the board, but I don't want to live at a Westminster property. And our CEO at the time said, well, why not? And he said, I don't want to be forced to move. I really don't. If I want to stay in my house and purchase services, you need to be okay with that. And so the board initiative took off that we were to begin helping people and assisting more with them staying in their current residence. That brings on a whole host of different problems, doesn't it? Okay? So really, really good for most residents. Really difficult for a couple that are struggling and may or may not even be aware how much they're struggling, but their neighbors know. Okay? So board directive really changed our trajectory in helping people age successfully where they were. And of course, it's predominantly independent living, right? So some of the things that we do include our wellness visits and our level of living team. Our level of living team meets every single week. Also, we have our own companion care services, which will morph into a home care company. We have internal and external case management services. Internal is to help people age successfully. If they need a lot of attention and a lot of setup, a lot of equipment, physician visits, med management, all that kind of stuff, then we help them contract those services. And we've got 3 really good contractors that we work with. Resident referrals. A lot of times we get emails, phone calls from people saying, hey, somebody's lost, somebody's upset, somebody's not coming out of their house, I haven't seen somebody in a long time, things like that. So we take those seriously. And we have a form, it's called a Stop and Watch. Stop and Watch was developed in the health center, and it continues to be used in the health center. But what our health advisory team did several years ago is we created a Stop and Watch that was assisted living specific and independent living specific. So this is the independent living Stop and Watch. We reminded our team members at the last town meeting, if they did not have one, it's about pocket size like that, little piece of paper, I don't know, 20, 30 pages in it, you write something down, you tear it off, you leave it with the health resource nurse. But the main things that they look at, and we're talking housekeeping and maintenance primarily, is appearance, and we're looking at changes in appearance. Somebody who was a neat Nick, perfectly groomed all the time, and now they just look completely disheveled, no apparent explanation. Did they have a stroke? What happened? Looking at their environment, somebody who was neat as a pen and now there's stuff everywhere and there's dents in the garage door and the car's getting beat up and the different things that you notice. Somebody who was always gardening and now is forgotten about the yard. And then their habits. We look at habits. Is somebody becoming more reclusive? They're not engaging with people. They don't come out anymore. They're not taking care of their pets, things like that. So that's what this Stop and Watch is meant to do for our staff who are non-clinicians, is prompt them to say, I notice a difference, I don't know what it is, but I want somebody to know, somebody who can do a wellness visit and come and check and see what's going on. Maybe somebody got a new diagnosis and, it really hit them hard and they're not taking care of themselves anymore or got bad news. I mean, you never know what the source is. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. And that's worth a phone call or a visit to find out what we can do to help. And can we put this person in touch with somebody? Or do we need to just call their physician and say, hey, we're noticing a change. Can we set up an appointment? And you do a deep dive and figure out what's going on with your patient. So this is the stop and watch for us, independent living. So one of the questions was, hey, I'm a neighbor and I'm really concerned. First point of contact really should be Peggy or one of the clinic nurses, because they will not sit on that information, I assure you. They're not going to necessarily come back to you and tell you what they did with that information, because you have HIPAA considerations. So we have a lot of privacy that we're dealing with. And it should be that way. We should keep your information private. We don't need to be coming back and reporting what happened to your neighbor. I know that neighbors like to know. Believe me, I know. But it's not appropriate for us to share. So we can tell you we stopped by, or we can tell you a little bit, but we really can't tell you anything except that we made contact. So, and that's when we say nurses can follow up with the neighbor. They can say, hey, we saw her, him, but they're not going to give you a report. Typically calling the doctor and reaching out to the family, the adult child. Some of the folks we struggle with the most, honestly, are people that don't have an adult child and they've got a POA and that person works at the bank. Those are a little tough to, get traction, to get things moving, because they're not invested like a child would be. So this is the fun part. What are the arguments? The biggest one is you just want more money. I bet you've heard that before. And another one that we wrestle with is you sign the contract when you move in, but your kids do not have a copy. They have no idea what to expect. They have no idea what we do and what we don't do here. And so we do wrestle with that with the adult children at times, because they're like, oh, you got a doctor 24 hours a day on staff, sitting there in your health resource center waiting for a phone call. No, we don't. We're still wrestling with the board directive to age in place, and we're still trying to do that successfully. We pull out all the stops to try and help people age in place at home if it's at all possible. It's typically the change is made when there's a safety issue. The families resent us forcing the issue. We even have people that say, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I have somebody I'm trying to meet with, no, I can't meet with you this week. It'll have to be next month sometime, when my schedule allows. I work for a living. So we get pushback just on those kinds of things. Hey, we want to sit and discuss. We want to share. We want to talk to you. We want to give you some specifics, that, content that's in these emails and phone calls. We're not making this stuff up. We have lots of better things to do than keep track of this person or that and call you every couple days. It's getting mission critical. And the bad part about waiting, and some of you probably already know this, is finally that fall happens and family came in toward assisted living. And guess what? They're going to get the last room on the end that looks over the balcony or the trash compactor, because it's the only one we've got left. And, I can think of people we've toured 4 and 5 times for years and said, if this is ideal, now's your time. It finally came open. No, I'll wait a little longer. And they're looking over the balcony. They're getting the best choice available, which is not what they want. And I feel bad about that when that happens. Some people say, people are targeting me. They resent me. They don't like me. I'm an odd duck. I always have been. I actually had a brother tell me that about his sister. She's a strange one. But she doesn't have dementia. I was on the phone with him. He was in another state. And I said, are you sure about that? Because what I'm hearing sounds like a little dementia. No, she's just strange. Okay. I don't think there's a diagnosis for that. You want me to pay more money? Because you know you go from independent to assisted. You know you're going to pay more money. You know, in some cases, double. You go to health center, it'll be triple. You know, the more the personnel in particular we have to utilize, the higher the fees are. And then residents don't know what the level of care requirements are. A lot of people assume they know what qualifies as independent, what qualifies as assisted, and what qualifies for skilled. And being strange, being annoying, being a not good neighbor, being a not nice neighbor, don't qualify. Okay? So that's why when they turn information into us, we go and assess and talk. And that's why we have checklists and raw scores and things like that. It helps keep everybody objective, including us. Because sometimes we think we know, but the checklist indicates different. So when people don't want to move, one of the things we do, we try to keep families informed, and that can be exhausting. And I know that Peggy is dealing with a couple families right now that she's on every couple days. Nurses forward information to our liaisons to provide tours, to offer to set up tours, things like that. That could be health center or assisted living. Provide documentation and emails about the concerns expressed. We may not send the exact email we got, but we extrapolate the content and share what's going on to keep the family informed. Sometimes I meet with people. Probably happens a couple times a year that I meet with people about level of care concern and say, it's getting to be that time. Here's a copy of the contract, here's the page in the contract to read, you realize I can force the move. I'm just telling you, sitting here as a compassionate person who loves what I do and cares about your family member, that's not how I want this to play out, okay? If there's any way we can keep this resident in their current level of care, there is no stone we won't turn. We will try everything. And I can tell you, that's far more exhausting than having the battle and forcing the move. It's much more exhausting to try and help and help and help and help and help. And eventually you run out of options. We know this. And you've probably seen this play out with friends and neighbors. So having a face-to-face and knowing it's not about money. Like I said, the resident or family gets stuck with what we have. We have, in a very few cases over the years, told individuals and their families and actually made them sign a contract that was put together by our legal team. You cannot stay in independent living unless you purchase private case management services, because we cannot be your one-stop shop. All day I need this, I need that. We cannot do it. We have other people we have to take care of. So that has happened in a few scenarios over the years. I can only think of a handful in the 24 years I've been here where we've said, this is the only way you can stay, because we can't monitor you in the fashion that you need. And then the level of living committee recommendations are discussed. And sometimes we come up with a great idea. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. These are the level of living committee members that meet weekly, and our clinic nurse, Peggy, is the lead. Security is there, lifestyle, so that's Lynn. Social services from the health center, our chaplain. He's a new addition, so he's typically not been in there in the past, but he does have some insight to share with us. Our fitness director, our admissions coordinator, our assisted living coordinator, our assistant executive director, our therapy manager, and the marketing rep may attend, but they do not have a say or a vote or anything. The only reason they attend is to keep track of potential rooms that might come available. And none of those goes on the list or anything like that, but they need to know if we have potentially 5 people moving out of independent living, they need to know, they need to prepare. So that's who our team is. And it's a very good team. So appropriate placement includes, for independent living, the MOCA and ADL score. You've seen that sheet. Anybody moving in has to have both of those documents. And the ADL score sheet should be updated as people move to assisted living. Now, one of the things that happens is we have our coordinator assess anybody moving from IL to AL, but also from health center to AL. Because that could be the plan going into the health center for rehab, but they may not have met their goals yet, and therefore they can't say transfer. Transfer is a deal breaker in assisted living. So in assisted living with a standard license, you have to be able to transfer yourself from point A to point B. And so if the goal is to transfer, they have to meet that goal. And Karen is chief in charge of making sure that anybody comes into assisted living meets criteria. That's memory or standard regular assisted living peri-center. So when coming out of the health center, that 1823, you saw that second document that I showed you that we said had 3 pages, that has to be completed in total. It's a service plan. And it lets us know as soon as somebody arrives into assisted living what our obligations are, what they can do, what they can't do, so we know where to assist. Okay? So this I wanted to share with you. So what I hear people say is, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going to see one of those flyers that has a little private duty person, and I'm going to take one of those stickers off of there, and I'm going to call her and have her come do my laundry. That's a really bad idea. I just want to tell you, there's a number of reasons that's a bad idea. But that's one of the things that people believe if they stay in their home, if they hire somebody private, that will help them age successfully. And I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but I am saying that there is the right way to go about it. And we have already vetted people. We have some that work for us, that's called our companion care services, and we have some we contract with, like your Home Instead, Right at Home folks, okay? So we know they follow the rules, and they know that if there's an issue with one of their staff, that they better take care of it right now. So this is not meant for you to read, but I did want to share what the purpose, what the policy is in personal assistance, some of your support services, the guidelines. So there are specific guidelines by location of who can provide private duty for you and how long they can stay with you, to include overnight services. That's listed here in these guidelines, and I'm happy to give you a copy. Or if you want to post it, let me know if you want me to post it. These are the responsibilities. You hire somebody, you manage their payroll, you report their income, you check their references, you do the criminal and background check, you do the drug test, you do the TB test, you get their liability insurance, you get their workman's comp insurance, you monitor them, and you provide training and education. Are you really up for that if you need private duty? It's a lot. So, obtaining personal assistance, there are guidelines as to what people should be able to do. It's not flipping. They have responsibilities to us and to the community. So not only do they have an obligation to you, they have an obligation to us. We shouldn't be the last to know if something happens to you. We should be among the first to know if something happens to you. You have a fall, you get rushed to the emergency room. There's an orientation process, and they also have to follow our fire safety guidelines. They have to present professionally, and they have to monitor your health, and they have to acknowledge that they've received these policies. Okay? So another question, until, say, somebody's waiting on a room, health center or assisted living, what happens in the meantime? So we contract with case managers, we line up private duty or personal companions, we can add housekeeping and laundry services, set up meal delivery, work closely with families to address any care needs, work with physicians. We do medication management, so it's a nominal fee. You have case managers that do that as part of their fee. You've probably seen those little flying saucers. Have you ever been in anybody's apartment and you see a little white flying saucer? Okay, I don't know what it's called. Because I'm not a nurse. It's a med dispenser. Thank you. Thank heaven there are nurses here. So it's a med dispense machine. And guess what it does? It's set up, it's filled, and then it's plugged into the wall, and then it's plugged into the phone line. And at a certain time, your pills pop out. And guess what happens if you don't take your pills? It tells on you. It calls whoever's number is dialed in there, and it says, so-and-so didn't take their meds today. It's evil. But it works. And you know what? If it helps somebody age successfully at home, I'm all for it. But don't complain when it tells on you. You take your meds. Okay? So wellness visits with greater frequency. I know that in Peggy's case, in the recent past, was visiting somebody every day or so. And then we're sending security over to see people and report back. So we have ways to be able to at least lay eyes on people and see, are they standing there? Are they standing by themselves? Are they leaning on the door? How do they look? Things like that. And then, of course, referral to the health center for convalescent days. We'll have families call and say, well, what do I do? I said, well, you got convalescent days. You haven't used them in years. Why don't you use them now? And give us some time to set up the infrastructure you need to then go back home. It may be something we need to add or build or whatever, handrails, something like that. So some of the costs related to home care, right now, 24 hours. 24 is the hourly rate, except for weekends, 36. That's per Liana. She checked one of the bills. Health center rates, $259. Private's $310. These are contract rates. Then you have your assisted living rates all listed there. I don't have to read them to you. And then you have your memory care. So you can see what those prices are. They're significant. Of course, private duty is too. And sometimes one outweighs the other, frankly. And then you're in a fine mess if your private duty doesn't show up because she or he had COVID or a family emergency or something like that. So a lot of people rely on private duty, and then when they're in the middle of it, they realize it's not all it's cracked up to be sometimes. But it can be a stopgap for people, right? So the health center is a real mystery, and people say, I don't know about the health center. I don't understand it. And there is a lot to it. It's a complex system. All skilled nursing are, not just us. But this handbook is available to you. And then this is what we give to people when they move in. There's a welcome. Let them know what the nursing structure is. Okay? What our physician services are. Chaplain as well. What you can expect from your nurse aide. Pharmacy, rehab services, dining times. Activities typically is as tolerated, male, convalescent days and charges. Services and supplies, so we try to make sure people understand those supplies. Once they come off of Medicare, then they're going to be responsible for those supplies. We also try to explain the best we can Medicare and Medicaid benefits, how those charges work, what they cover, what they don't, and then how your charges are figured. So days 1 through 20, any skilled nursing with Medicare, 100%. Day 21 through 100, you're going to have copays. Then how Part B works, and if people are dual eligible. Okay? We go into moves and transfers, how they work. Nominating your staff for legendary service if you find somebody doing exceptional service. The bed hold transfer policy, it's a real bone of contention sometimes. We have to, by law, if somebody leaves and goes to the hospital, we have to send paperwork with them so that they understand that if their items are still in the room, they're still being charged if they want to go back to that room. Something we have to do. And I've had families call and say, well, that was heartless, that was cruel. I said, well, we don't want to add insult to injury and you get a bill for 6 days of private pay when you didn't think you were going to be paying for that. If you want to get your stuff or you want us to pack it, we'll do it. But we don't want to slap you with these charges. Okay? So how Medicaid operates, lift chairs and motorized chairs, solicitation, transfer, all of these things are covered in that booklet. Care plans, when care plans happen, how care plans happen, and filing a grievance or suggestion procedure. Safety, resident policies, retention policies, medication policies. A lot of people like to bring their own drugs. That can be problematic. For us, especially, you don't have an order. Transportation policy, personal assistant policy, which we went over, restraints. A lot of people think we should be able to offer restraints. We do not do that in any way, shape, or form. Haven't for a very, very long time. And I think that's all I have. I was trying to, it was 11:01. So I apologize, it's a solid hour of me talking. You must be sick of it. But if you have questions, we have people with microphones and we will try to answer them. And if there's any copies of things you want, just let me know and I'll get you a copy. So we have a question right here.
I have a moment.
So Nan Baird, okay?
I'm Nan Baird, and my question is, if both people in the family, or one, if that's what it is, in an independent situation, is moved to another position, how long can you keep your house?
As long as you want.
Oh.
If you're living there, you don't both have to be living there. One of you can stay in the house and the other one move to assisted or skilled.
Well, what if both of you move to, say, assisted living?
So typically what we do is we work with the family to try and, number one, determine if those moves are permanent. That's usually the first question is, if I'm in the health center, am I here to stay? Okay? So that's really got to be the question that's answered first and foremost. Is it a permanent move? And then we typically have Carolina, who's our moving coordinator and assistant for marketing, work with the family to try and determine when that house is going to be emptied out and what we can do to facilitate and how we can get Mimi over there and so on and so forth. So I know of 2 scenarios off the top of my head where I thought people stayed an extraordinarily long time. And so in one case we worked between us and the home office because that was about a 2-year vacancy. And then we have another one that's about a 1-year vacancy. And we have to also make sure that we don't have families sort of living there too. So, because those kinds of things happen, you don't even realize it till a neighbor tells you. Or security says, I've seen the same car there for a month. Yes, ma'am.
Shannon, can you tell people who moved in after that booklet became available where they can get that booklet?
So this booklet that's on here right now is available, I didn't mean to do that, is available by Melissa Lambert in the Health Center Admissions Office. Melissa Lambert can get you a copy of that booklet. Yes. It's the Health Center booklet. It just tells you the policies and so forth. Okay, next. Yes, ma'am.
To your point of trying to pull out all the stops and everything to be able to keep people in independent living, if you're in independent living and you would love to be able to come over here and participate in activities here and so on and so forth, but you don't have the ability to drive, are there options available for residents in independent living to be able to get here into the core area for activities, to be able to get over to the swimming pool, to physical therapy and things like that if they don't have the ability to drive?
The ability to drive. I'm going to probably refer you to Lynn Kimmel. I know that she has over the years set up transportation services. Now, when it comes to therapy will actually have someone pick you up. So, especially like for outpatient therapy. Yeah. Another question. Yes.
Wondering how this interfaces with the excellent hospice care that we have in this area. Worked with Big Bend and with Covenant, and if the doctor says it's okay to give hospice care, how can we do that here?
We do that in every level of care. We do it now. And we work very closely with hospice. We have a great relationship with Big Bend Hospice in particular. And we work with them in our health center primarily, sometimes in assisted living and in independent living as well. And so we have a great relationship. We work very well together. And we have over the years done very well together. Yes. Yes, sir.
Ron McQuaid from Canopy Oaks. I have a question about long-term care. What of these expenses can be covered through long-term care?
So you're saying your long-term care policy?
Yes.
Okay, so my answer is typically a lot of these expenses it's stated in your policy. And one of the things I do, and I still owe somebody a long-term care policy meeting, I, as a free service, will review your long-term care policy. If you will give me a copy, you don't trust me with the original, give me a copy of your policy. And what I do, and it's typically, I don't know, 22 or so pages, typically the policy will outline how much is paid. And what I'll do is on your copy of your policy, I'll actually write notes about what's covered here, and I'll also give you a copy of our rates. So you actually know what percentage of those is covered, and also read your rider and see if the rider adds exponential value, because a lot of people have a rider, and those riders, if they increase like by 5% every year since you purchased your policy, they offset a lot of the cost. And it's really, really worth it to have those policies. And I've read some excellent policies, so I'm happy to read yours if you would like. But I have two people in front of you. Okay. Somebody else. Yes, sir.
Quite a few people out here are veterans.
Yes.
How much will the VA pay for on some of these expenses?
Vicki, I'm looking at you. I believe, are we talking about health center expenses?
Well, any expenses for one?
I believe the medication is one of the things that they will offset, medication expenses. They do not offset room and board that I know of. So, and I don't know of any other durable medical equipment. But your physician visits and your pharmacy, they should offset. I have seen that.
Okay.
Yes.
You.
Somebody else? Yes, ma'am.
Shannon,
Yes, ma'am.
we have 5 adult children. 3 of them are retired. If we needed care, is there a problem with one of the 3 coming and being with us while we need special care, living in our home with us?
Yes.
Okay, tell me.
If you're going to have somebody do that for you, they would fall into the private duty category. And we'd
So they would need they would need to prove the same qualifications that any contractor would need to come and be with us and take care of us? Is that what you're saying?
I would say most of them, because you wouldn't manage payroll, things like that. What we would do is probably walk you through the requirements and see where they fell as a private duty person being in your home.
Assuming they would be nothing but a caring sitter?
Mm-hmm. So, for example, we would do a background check.
Okay.
Okay?
If they're on campus, sure, got that.
Right. So you and I would probably have to walk through that list and
Sure.
see where they fell. And I've done that with other family members before. It happened during COVID, actually.
Right.
And we were in a really strange quagmire. And so we really had to game out every single thing and say, okay, well, this applies. No, this doesn't apply. Well, this
Yeah.
applies. This doesn't apply.
Right.
And so forth. Because what we've had people do is move in and say, hey, I take care of my dad. But yeah, I'm going to use your fitness center and your pool
No,
and
no,
your
no, no,
meals,
no.
and I'm going to do all this stuff, like a guest.
No.
I'm like, well, what are you? Are you a visitor? Are you a volunteer? Are you a caregiver? Are you living here illegally?
Right.
What are you doing? And so we have to bring some specifications to light to say, if this is what your role is, this is what you're allowed to do, and this is what you're not allowed to do.
Sure.
Because when they cross those lines, I hear from other residents.
Right.
And I did, in the particular case I'm referencing that happened during COVID.
And rightly so, Shannon. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Can I get a copy of the assessment of daily living skills
living skills. Yes, you send me an email.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I just had one more quick
Oh, sure.
question. The pendant that people have, is there a wrist version?
Yes,
of
there
that?
is.
Okay.
So
great.
if you have a pendant, you can wear it as a lanyard, you can wear it on your wrist.
Okay, is there something that you can get to secure it on your wrist?
I was looking for
Okay.
Robert in security.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if you will see Robert in security, he will get you the wristband. Yes, sir.
Shannon,
Sir.
I want to comment about our security.
Yes.
In 2 occasions, we helped a neighbor, and that neighbor had called security and 911. And the service was absolutely excellent.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you.
The security person came very well trained, very, very attentive to the needs of the resident, got on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. Once the emergency personnel treated the patient, that particular security person accompanied the patient to the ambulance.
Oh.
It was absolutely excellent. In both cases, I sent Robert an email complimenting what we saw, our experience, and I also copy you. And I think it's fair to mention that in this meeting.
Thank you so much. And they're part of our care team and eyes and ears as well. They are security 2.0. Yes, ma'am.
What qualifications or symptoms or whatever do you need for your 15 convalescent days? I mean, do you have to
Nothing.
have a doctor? Can I just say I'm tired and I need to rest? I mean, what?
Okay, so
I mean,
earlier,
I'm there.
so earlier, I think I showed you what documents we need. See if I can pull them up. So we still need that 3008. I hate to tell you. No, that's not it. I'm sorry. We need a 3008. We still have to have orders to admit you. So that was one part of the 3008. I think I hit something that made this blow up. We still have to have doctor's orders. There's not a magic diagnosis for you to come in, but we still have to have the orders. Otherwise, you walk in, lay in a bed, we can't touch you. We can wave. We say, hi, I'm glad you're here. But we can't touch you. We can't do anything for you. We can't even prepare food. I mean, nothing, because all those orders specify what type of meal we're allowed to deliver and, you know, those kinds of things, what activities you can tolerate and so forth. So we have to have orders. It's not a hotel. Yes, ma'am. Okay, there's 2 people raising hands. Yes, ma'am. You have a Florida State shirt on.
She's going first.
Yes, ma'am.
She's going first.
Okay, Ms. Badger.
Oh, okay. When I moved in, I'm quite sure that we had nurses here 24/7 to help independents.
Yes.
And I believe that's been changed.
And that's why we've given security additional training, like CPR and fire safety training, things like that, so that they can assist. And you can see by Mr. Manny's response, they do really, really well. Now, if they need help, they can still call assisted living. They can still call the health center. They can say, I need guidance, talk me through this. Our nurses are still here and still available. The problem is having them leave people who need them in a care environment that is where people are expecting 24-hour service, to go to a non-care environment when we have people who are trained to be able to assist.
Okay, so security can call them if
Yes.
necessary.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have had on occasion and said, hey, we need some help. But that's not part of their regular and customary obligation anymore. And that's one of the reasons why we provided additional training to security, including CPR. Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible for you to post all of these documents on MyWLife? You may find yourself overwhelmed
Okay.
by individual requests.
I understand. That's a great idea. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to clarify something. That whole list you had about, you'd have to do their WDO, for getting care in an independent living. So you had a list of things that you would have to oversee, their payroll, their
Oh, the private duty requirements.
private
Yes.
duty.
Yes.
Now, when that private duty, is that for just contracting through your services, or is that a
So our services are companion care. Those are employees. We've already done all that stuff. But
right.
if you
so
decide
if we got care, say my mom needed 24-hour care in her independent living, and we did it through you all, we wouldn't have to do all those things.
Correct.
But if we wanted to hire our own person,
You have to make sure you're doing all those
Okay.
things. Yes. And our contractors do all those as well. So our contractor, Right at Home and Home Instead, they abide by this requirement as well. That's why they're already vetted by us. So, but if you get somebody from Publix or your housekeeper from home that you really liked, then we've got to make sure we're doing those criminal background checks and stuff like that. Because let me tell you, people get really bent out of shape, find out that neighbor hired somebody and that person's a criminal, and they're my slab mate, and they're in my yard, and stuff like that. And I think it's justifiable. It's a justifiable worry that you end up finding that somebody has a criminal record after the fact. Yes, ma'am.
Say you have a married couple, and one has to be admitted to the memory care center, and the other one is still in the apartment or wherever they were. So that becomes more expensive. So how do you handle that if they cannot afford to pay for both places?
So one thing to consider is that you're not going to pay the second person fee in your home anymore. Okay, so you're reacquiring that money. That goes to help offset some of the cost in your health center memory care assisted living, which clearly is more. The other thing is that people do apply for benevolent assistance, and I can facilitate with that process. It's one of the slides that was up here. So if people run out of money through no fault of their own, we can support them. And then if you have a long-term care policy, we can help you access your long-term care policy as well. And there are people that are very adept at doing that. We manage about 20 right now, long-term care policies. Yes, ma'am.
Oh. Shannon, is it possible to get the tram back? When I moved here, we had a tram. Somebody brought up transportation, and we had a tram which worked beautifully for a lot of residents. Is there a possibility of getting the tram back for transportation?
So I see the tram parked up there. Why don't I talk to Lynn about that and see if we can get a regular schedule? Will one of you remind me, please? I apologize. I will work with Lynn on the tram. I think it's being used a lot, but I think it's being used by Martha. And she and the memory care residents are coming back and forth to programs and stuff like that. So the tram is being used. It's just not being used the way it was before. We may need another one. I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the convalescent days. Each resident gets 15. Now, is that...
Actually, each resident gets 90.
Gets what?
90 per year. And it starts in January. The first 15 are free, and the second 21 through 90, 16 through 90 are at a different rate, and I think the rate was posted $200+ a day.
Is that per year?
Yes.
Okay.
Because then they start over again in January. So they're renewed every single year. And when you say each resident, it's each contract resident. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Hello.
I have 2 items. First, you indicated some difficulty in talking with some people and family later, trying to get the the client, the resident to move. I think that you need to use cell phones. I have found that by having my cell phone with me and my daughter on call, she's right there. She can hear what the doctor's saying. She can hear what I'm saying. and she can make corrections or help me to understand what the issues are.
So that's a great recommendation to all of your friends that live here is.
And so if staff are having difficulties with working with someone, see if you can't expand more than just the person themselves. We
Got it.
don't always understand the whole things, but we communicate, if we can identify a person outside for you that we will always contact with, I think that would be helpful.
That's a great recommendation, thank you.
The other thing I want to say is that I was here before you had the extra fee for somebody. So that puts me back a ways. But
Okay.
also, I had a partner who died here. And I literally did not know who, even when he was in hospice, I was officially supposed to contact. And I'm guessing that it's whoever, like Peggy Lee, is in charge of the Health Resource Center for us.
So you are correct, it would be the clinic nurse.
For anything that's going on. And if we want to,
Yes.
if we were hiring outside people, let them know.
Yes.
Okay.
She is your main point of contact for all things medical.
And she's very good at follow-up for us. Thank you.
I agree. Peggy's been with us 20, how many? 24? 24 years. So Peggy and I came here about the same time. So, and she worked in the health center for probably 22 of those years. So she is an excellent resource for you. She knows how our system works. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. These are a lot of great questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope never to be in a position of outliving my resources.
Yes, ma'am.
But I did notice that in the contract it says if that happens, you'll be moved to the least expensive unit,
Yes.
which is understandable,
Yes.
or community. And that really concerned me because does that mean would move me to another Westminster community that is less expensive than Westminster Oaks?
Well, to elaborate on that, I have never required anybody to move to a different location because they applied or were awarded benevolent assistance, much less another community, because I just think that's cruel and unusual. And, you know, you're probably going through enough as it is without moving or having to consider anything else. So do we have the right to do that, to make somebody move to a least expensive unit? Yes. But in all reality, we do not force people to move to a less expensive unit. No community, yeah. No. And I apologize, I had not identified that language. I need to reread that. Anybody else? We can do this all day. I have reinforcements. No other questions? Awesome. Thank you so much for coming.